Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to talk about the 4 best decks to play since the most recent patch and nerfs to Reno, zilliax, and Celestial Projectionist. That's probably the biggest patch until the Perils and Paradise expansion hits. So I'm going to show you 4 decks that I think you should play if you're looking to hit Legend or climb in the Legend ranks. So first off, the meta is kind of owned by 2 decks in particular, Druid and Handbuff Pally. These are, I would say, by far the 2 best decks in the format. Ramp Druid, there are many different variants of this deck. This is the variant that I play. The idea here is simple. You mulligan pretty aggressively for Splish Splash Whelp. You probably are okay keeping Malfurion's Gift or a Cactus Construct, but this card, Whelp, is going to get you the most win rate value of all cards in the deck just because ramping on 2 is so strong. You ramp in the early game, you hit a middle game where you're playing Summer Flower Child, or Doomkin, and Doomkin is so crazy because this stalwarts your opponent for 1 turn, sets them back with tempo, and gives you even 1 more piece of ramp. And your endgame, of course, is things like Marin, Yogg-Saron, zilliax, and ANR. Pretty crazy endgame. Some decks run things like Spine-Tail Drake, the 4-mana 5/4 that does 5 damage battlecry, and I think that is perfectly fine. I'm running Puppet Master Dorian because I think he's fun. I think I got a Puppet Master Dorian here, Pendant of Earth, and of course Take to the Skies to kind of get that extra value off of Dorian. I'm not saying that's optimal. I don't think it's optimal at all, but winning's not everything. You got to have a little bit of fun, right? So this is the list that I like. Cards like Trog, Gem Chopper are pretty crazy, but like I said, the mulligan is pretty simple. Splish Splash Whelps, and then yeah, you do some crazy stuff with this deck. Handbuff Pally is the other strong deck in the format, and this is not an aggro deck, okay? There's an aggro Pally out there, Flood Paladin. I've talked about it before. It is a good deck, and it does beat many of these decks, but these 4 decks are just by far better than everything else in the format. And Handbuff Pally, it is more of a mid-range deck, so what you want to do here is you want to spend your early game drawing cards, finding your Painter's Virtue, playing out a Muscletron, playing out a Grime Street Outfitter, and you want to take over in the middle game where you can play these heavily statted minions for cheap so that you out-tempo the existing board. And then what happens in the late game is, your Leroy's been sitting in your hand and it's buffed to like 12-12 or whatever, and maybe you have an outfit tape, and then you just swing for 20. Something crazy like that. Oftentimes, that's what the end game looks like. This deck, very strong. It struggles only against, I would say, Rainbow Dk, and even at that, it's not that bad. This deck is very, very strong. Magatha, Bane of Music's pretty crazy tempo card to refuel you. Toy Captain Tarim can be insane, especially if he or the miniature is buffed. Like, it's just so strong. You have a zilliax in here. This deck is so crazy. Like, it has inevitability. At some point, if your opponent is not overwhelming you, then you're going to just drop 2 pairs of 10-12 zilliaxes and call it a day, right? That double their attack, right? So very strong. You have great control cards here at the end, like trump cards like Amadas the Keeper and Yogg-Saron, which help you win games. The third deck I would suggest is Excavate Dk, and the reason why I suggest this deck is because it has a pretty decent matchup versus Paladin, and it does well against the entire field except for Druid. So now that Vicious Syndicate has spoiled that Druid is probably the best deck in the game, and if over 40% of your meta is Druid, this might not be the deck to play. But aside from that, it is very, very fun and a great deck here. Miracle Salesman, Runes of Darkness. You're not playing any weapons in here. This is an Excavate Dk list. So what I want you to kind of keep in mind here is, when you think about Rainbow Dk, you think about core spending, right? You Climactic Necrotic Explosion, that 10-mana card is your win condition often. But the problem with Rainbow Dk is finding the balance between good cards and corpse spending cards so that you can add value to your Climactic Necrotic Explosion. Before, we used to have the 2/4 Malignant Horror that had Revive and it automatically spent 4 corpses at the end of a turn. That was amazing. We don't have that anymore. So instead, we've gotten rid of all the corpse spending ideas, gotten rid of C and E completely, and instead, we've replaced all of that with Excavate cards, right? So now you got a deck that's just full value. Like, this is really a control deck in hiding. You got all the Excavate cards, you got Threads of Despairs, you got Plucky Painfin, which draws you Burrow Buster and Reska. You got Zilliax, the big Zilliax, you got Yogg Saron, you got Primus, and you got Marin the Manager, and Headless Horseman. So if you're interested in playing the big bombs in Death Knight, this is the deck to play. Like I said, it's good against everything except probably the Druid deck. I would say it does struggle a little bit there, but it is a fun deck to play. I don't know if you noticed, but the Druid deck and this deck both play Marin the Manager, and Marin the Manager is very, very good. Give this a try. The last deck I suggest, and this is if your meta is very, very heavy with Druid, would be Shopper DH. Now, this is not the knocker Shopper DH that I had previously suggested. This one is the more aggressive, straight-up Shopper version, where you're using the early mechs to cheat out a Zilliax. Mulliganing for this deck is very simple. You're looking for Instrument Tech, the weapon, Sock Puppet Slither Spear, Drone Deconstructor, Miracle Salesman, and Frequency Oscillator. I would keep Drone Deconstructor and Frequency Oscillator if I was versus aggressive deck, or if I had Zilliax in hand. In all other situations, I would mulligan pretty aggressively for Miracle Salesman, Sock Puppet Slither Spear, and Instrument Tech or the weapon. Even Spirit of the Team, like if you have Sock Puppet Slither Spear, that would be a keep. This deck, the goal is simple. You play early creatures, you get early damage on the face, you get into your early turn 3 or 4 weapon turn, and then you get into your turn 4 or 5 Window Shopper. That's how the deck wins. It's very quick. It's much quicker than the other 3 decks, which are all pretty much mid-range, light control decks. Games are fast. So if you're looking for something to climb quickly, I would suggest this. But, it does struggle against things like Reno Warrior. There are decks that, Shopper DH does, it's not great against, but it is really good against Druid, and it's quick. So if you're looking for quick games, a quick climb, this is definitely one that I would play. Anyway, these are all the decks. These are the last 4 decks that I'm going to play until the expansion releases in 3 weeks or so. And the channel will be full of videos of these, as well as reviews and deck ideas for the expansion. So let me know what cards interest you the most in the expansion and what deck ideas you have. I'm always open and eager to hear what decks people are looking to try. Also, if you are playing something else to climb to legend, let me know. Let me know what's working for you. I'll see you next time.